Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is Leon Vainstein speaking from Los Angeles, California. Today, President Trump announced that an agreement has been reached with China, and now he and the president of China need to review and approve the terms. New inflation data has been received, and it is slowing down, despite the claims of almost all experts that because of Trump's tariffs, everything is getting more expensive. Obviously, experts don't know that snake venom can be deadly, but in different doses and consistencies, it can be used for treatment. It has become clear that United States citizens who were born abroad came here legally and are living in the United States are leaving the Democratic Party in large numbers and joining the ranks of Trumpism. Probably not even to the Republicans, but specifically to Trump himself. This is also evident in their negative attitude toward illegal immigrants, illegals, as they call them, who have flooded the country. Liberal, well, that means either dishonest and completely stupid, or maybe both, dishonest and stupid. The media keeps telling us that immigrants, Latino Asians, Eastern Europeans, most of those who were born somewhere else and moved, ran, or crawled into America, with every fiber of their souls and hearts, of course, they support any immigration. They must be terribly against Trump's war on immigrants because we are a country of immigrants, because they themselves are immigrants. But they forget to add that there is legal immigration when you ask and are given the opportunity. And there are those who broke the law and, bypassing the country's laws, came to this country. As always, we're told without any evidence that this is common knowledge. And he also gives the example of the year 2020 when, according to surveys, 32% of naturalized citizens, those who obtain citizenship not by birth but through so-called naturalization, so it turns out that this percentage voted more for the Democrats than for the Republicans. But this is only now, referring to 2008, 2016, 2020, and 2025. What has changed, if anything has changed? Let's ask Trump, who hates the media.
Let's just start with the fact that immigrant citizens, immigrant voters, voters born abroad, in 2024 and 2025 have shifted significantly to the right on this issue, compared to where they were in 2020. Speaking of trust in immigration, in 2020, imagine this. The Democrats had a 32-point advantage. So on this issue, voters and immigrants were on the side of the Democrats. Fast forward to 2024 and 2025, look at this shift. Among voters and immigrants, there was a 40-point shift to the right. Now on this issue, Republicans have an 8-point advantage over Democrats, more than any other group I was able to find. The group of voters that has become tougher on immigration issues is actually immigrants themselves, immigrants who are registered to vote in this country.
Immigrants have risen up against illegal immigrants. Immigrants have risen up against the preference given to illegals over those who pay politicians' salaries and those whom they were elected to serve, promised, and sworn to protect. Immigrants are fed up with drug dealers, thieves, pimps, murderers, and rapists who were led into the country by Mr. Biden and his associates.
Well, that's regarding that issue. But what about their attitude towards, let's say, traditionally and historically Donald Trump?
Yes. So you see this shift and you wonder what's going on under the hood. Look, Donald Trump. Remember when he first ran in 2016, voters and migrants were his weak point? Now the share of votes for Trump among citizens and migrants registered to vote has changed. In 2016, he received 36% of the votes.
In 2016, only 36% of citizen migrants, that is, immigrants who became citizens, voted for Trump. And by the way, I was one of them. And in 2020, 39%, or a little more. Let's watch another bit.
In 2020, 39% of the votes. And now look, in 2024, it's already as much as 47% of the votes. In some polls that I saw, he barely lost among these voters. In others, he barely won. I'll say it again. No other group of voters shifted to the right from 2020 to 2024. Immigrants did too. In some polls, Donald Trump even won among them. On average, the result is about the same. So despite all this talk about illegal immigrants and the claims that Trump is supposedly tough on them, immigrant voters themselves are increasingly sympathetic to Donald Trump and are shifting more to the right on immigration issues and toward the Republican Party.
That is, in 2024, even according to the admissions of the desperately left-wing media, already 47% of naturalized, foreign-born United States citizens voted for Trump. Gentlemen, that's half of the Latinos in this country, that's half of the Asians in this country, that's half of the Eastern Europeans living in this country. And in 2025, there will already be 8% more former immigrants for the program that we now call the Republican or Trump program, more than for the Democratic one. I don't really understand their program. And again, this means the majority of Latin Americans, the majority of Asians, and so on. But Latin Americans today already make up 14 to 15% of the entire country's population. And in California, I think it's about 30 or 40%, maybe even 40%. So those whom the Democrats considered tame, their obedient ones, have rebelled.
The net approval rating of immigrants who are here illegally among immigrant citizens, that is, those registered to vote in 2020, was plus 23 points in net approval rating. But look where we are in 2024, minus 6 points, a negative indicator. So immigrant citizens are becoming increasingly negative toward those who are here illegally. Therefore, I believe it's very important when we discuss this issue from a political point of view to distinguish between those who are illegal immigrants, those who are here legally, and those who are already citizens and voters. Because it's this group of voters who feel increasingly distant from those immigrants who are here legally. And that's why, again, when we talk about this, at least from a political point of view, that's why Donald Trump feels so confident. Because actually, among the group that would seem to be the most opposed to this, in fact, they are increasingly supporting not just Donald Trump, but also the Republican stance on immigration. And they are distancing themselves more and more from those immigrants who are here illegally.
So immigrants have split into two groups, legal and illegal. Some have asked for permission to settle in America, while others said, I don't want to ask anyone at all. I don't care whether the owners of the house I want to live in want it or not. If I want to, I'll get in there through a window or a crack. By the way, do you know what exactly they did? Well, that's the police department that deals with illegals in Los Angeles. So what was the reason for the riots? All of them, yes? What was the reason for the riots? The mayor and the governor of California said that they are catching children. Those ones, yes, the federal police, they are catching children, putting them in cages, separating them from their parents, acting brutally, and so on. Naturally, yes. And what do we know about who the raids were organized against? Let's see what instructions the manager gave to his employees.
The head of border affairs under Donald Trump, Tom Homan, stated that the raids, which sparked violent unrest in Los Angeles, were not related to immigration. Homan explained that the raids conducted in downtown Los Angeles on Friday were part of a criminal investigation into a money laundering scheme and cartel activity. Let's be clear, the Democrats are causing unrest in Los Angeles because as part of a criminal investigation, cartel members were targeted for their alleged criminal activity and money laundering scheme. I got it all right, friends. And now the mayor of Los Angeles, Karen Bass, gave an interview this morning. I'll tell you right away, it was another complete failure. See for yourself.
I think you all understand that the city doesn't get notifications when someone arrives at the workplace. And basically, we rely on reports from the community, especially from immigrant rights organizations that have created a rapid response network. That's usually how we find out about M conducting a raid.
I have to pause because I want to make sure you're getting the right information. She says out loud what people usually keep quiet about. They don't cooperate with federal authorities. They use the local community through their rapid response network to find out when raids are happening. Remember, they can't conduct a raid without sufficient evidence. A warrant, a deportation order, understood. And the fact that this mayor refuses to cooperate with federal authorities and prefers to use the local community to get information shows that she is not in control of the situation.
We also received reports about people who are here legally, who came for their annual appointment at the immigration office, maybe even with their family, and they were being detained, which is absolutely unnecessary. I was asked what the Marines will do when they arrive. That's a good question. I have no idea. The National Guard, which is here now, has only one task: to guard one building, specifically the federal building in the city center. The second building is the federal building on Westwood Boulevard, and as far as I know, nothing has happened in Westwood at all, so there was no need for it. The idea that the administration is usurping the powers of our state government, taking them away from our governor, Gavin Newsom. The governor knows that if we had submitted a request to bring in the National Guard and it reached him, he would have agreed. That question never came up because we never even considered turning to the National Guard. I want you to know that the violence that occurred really did require the Los Angeles police to ask for additional help, but not from the federal government.
So, once again, ladies and gentlemen, we have to stick to the facts because these people are counting on you not to check the information. She claims that people come to their hearings, which they attend every year. And these are people without documents or those who are trying to follow all the rules in order to eventually get citizenship. All right. And then it shows up, detains them, and eventually deports them. Now, the only way it can do that?
How?
They need a deportation order. And in some cases, if not most, when they come to court, they're told, hey, you can't stay here anymore. You have to leave. The order is issued. Immigration and Customs Enforcement is on site, and they are being removed. That's why it's called expedited removal proceedings. That's why they won't tell you the other side of this issue, because it's much easier to be lazy and just say what's on the surface. That doesn't mean that's exactly how things are. And secondly, she says that the local law enforcement doesn't need any help, but at the same time, she completely contradicts the chief of police. So, who's telling the truth? Well, I know who isn't. It's the Democrats who just held a press conference this morning and are now making these kinds of statements. Listen for yourself.
Protests? And even those who didn't agree with us standing up for peaceful protest didn't resort to any violence. No one was
Shot. No one.
was killed. Remember that. And when martial law is imposed, what will you say? I didn't catch the point. Don't miss the point, all of you. Don't think that just because the National Guard was called in, there was violence. There was no violence.
This concerns retribution, provocation, and an effort to divert attention. This is retribution because Donald Trump doesn't like California. He doesn't like our laws. He doesn't like our politics. This is a provocation. It was Donald Trump who sent the military to a peaceful protest.
We still don't know all the consequences of this unprecedented authoritarian abuse of power, but let me be clear. Democrats in Congress stand fully in solidarity with the people of Los Angeles, with our immigrants, with our sisters and brothers, and with the peaceful protesters who dare to speak out.
So there were protests, but were they peaceful? Yes, peaceful. Of course, there were protests, but someday we should figure out what exactly peaceful protests are. For example, is burning a car or looting a store considered a peaceful protest or not? I suspect that when it's convenient, it's called peaceful. When it's not, when it's us, then it's peaceful, but when it's not for us, then it's not peaceful, right? It's interesting, then, why does the United States Attorney General Pam Bundy give a speech like that?
We will enforce the law no matter what they do. Look around, everything looks like a third world country, but it's not. This is the United States of America. We, including Donald Trump, will not tolerate this. And one more thing tonight. Look at all these wonderful men and women from the Los Angeles Police Department. We will protect them. if they don't protect and hold accountable the people who abused the Los Angeles police during civil unrest, then, according to Article 18-231, we can bring federal charges against those who assault state law enforcement officers with a maximum sentence of up to 5 years. And we're going to do that. We will hold them federally accountable. If California won't protect its law enforcement officers, we will protect the Los Angeles police and the sheriff's office there. We currently have 9 open cases regarding assaults on federal employees, and more are expected. In the Molotov cocktail cases you've heard about, we've already charged 1 person. There will be more. 3 cases remain unresolved. Looters, you saw how they started looting last night, going into stores, the 7-Eleven, and the pharmacy. Usually charges aren't filed for such actions, but now we're doing it under federal law. Under the Hobbs Act, we're charging them with robbery. If you rob a business in California, you face up to 20 years in prison. If you spit on a federal law enforcement officer, you won't get away with it anymore. As President Trump said, if you spit, you get what you deserve. Get ready.
All right, the vice president stated, this administration will not allow itself to be intimidated by lawlessness. We will support the FBI agents searching for criminals, the National Guard, the police, the infantrymen restoring order, as well as the officers enforcing immigration laws. President Trump will not back down. Also in this interview, Pam Bondi announced that they have identified the person who was throwing concrete blocks at federal vehicles. Listen.
Do you recall the concrete block case, Sean? We have breaking news right now. It's the case where that guy was smashing concrete blocks and throwing them at police cars. That federal officer injured his hand. He was wearing a mask. The FBI identified him. Bill Asali, our outstanding federal prosecutor, along with the FBI, did an amazing job. This person has just been identified, and right now his home is being searched with a warrant and his identity has been confirmed. Look at his face. He will end up on the most wanted list. You just broke this news. His face is everywhere now. That's him. He was identified thanks to the excellent work of the police and the FBI. So you can run, but you can't hide. We're coming after you at the federal level. If you attack a police officer, rob a store, loot or spit at a police officer, we will come after you.
Right now, the FBI has released this flyer. Information is wanted about the assault on a federal officer and the damage to government property. Now they have his face, and they're offering a $50,000 reward. This was obviously posted today. Earlier, because he was finally identified, I'm just showing you what this has led to. And guys, I don't understand why people think it's worth attacking law enforcement officers. Well, I get it. You hate President Trump, but do you hate him so much that you're willing to throw your life away? You see, are you really ready to destroy everything you have in your life? Is it really that serious for you? I hope not. And now, here's what President Trump said earlier about Gavin Newsom during a roundtable at the White House. Listen,
The Speaker believes the governor of California is incompetent and ruining the state through his leadership and policies. And if I hadn't stepped in, if we hadn't brought in the National Guard, and we would have brought in even more if it was necessary, because we have to make sure that law and order are maintained. You had a disaster happening there, and now they themselves admit that it was a disaster. Yesterday, I was watching Nashelnika. By the way, he's a good person, and he said, well, we were lucky we did it because they were overloaded. You saw what was happening, so we did the right thing. Everyone agrees with that. But you have a governor who let the city burn, didn't want them to send water, and I sent billions of gallons of water. I wanted to do it in my first term, but they didn't want to. I don't know, they had some environmental reasons, but in reality, there were no environmental reasons at all. I think it's just a political philosophy.
And the governor of California says the exact opposite. Like, you saw bricks being thrown at cars, but actually there weren't any. Those bricks that, look, you see, they're being thrown, right? They weren't there.
Cancel this absurd, illegal, and immoral order. Let our military come home. The absurdity of threatening the people of the United States of America with their own army, our proud army.
A few moments later, the judge denied the state of California's request to prohibit Trump from using the California National Guard to maintain peace and order during these protests.
The governor even went to court saying nothing was happening here at all. While that guy from Washington, Trump, the annoying redhead, didn't send the guardsmen, we need to urgently remove them from Los Angeles. But the problem is that this time their trick didn't really work out. The judge said, "Gavin, you've completely lost your mind."
Elena, this is a big event. Judge E.E. denied California's request. Tell us about it and tell us what the president said in his speech at Fort Bragg.
I mean, this is very important for the president and his administration. And just a few minutes ago, we heard the president say that he wants to liberate Los Angeles. And indeed, he sharply criticized Governor Gavin Newsom and Mayor Bass for how they responded to his decision to deploy the National Guard and the Marines to try to suppress these protests.
I understand that this might sound like a crazy radical idea, guys, but maybe if Gavin Newsom fought with the same energy to actually stop the violent riots in his state as he, of course, sued and put on performances against Donald Trump, maybe we wouldn't have ended up in this situation at all. Maybe there wouldn't even be a question about whether the National Guard needs to be brought in to stop the riots in Los Angeles, because those riots wouldn't have happened at all. If Gavin Newsom had really meant what he said when he tried to claim that the Los Angeles police and local law enforcement had the situation under control, which, as is obvious and clearly visible, was never the case. But nevertheless, today we'll tell you the whole story and show you the amusing outcome when Gavin Newsom's lawsuit against Donald Trump ends up being a complete failure. I believe many Trump supporters, including myself, already suffer from post-traumatic stress disorder. Every time we hear that some Democrat is filing a lawsuit for a temporary restraining order or an injunction against the Trump administration, you think, here we go again, those legal games are starting again? They'll try to block Trump's actions through a district court, and then it'll all go higher up. However, ladies and gentlemen, it seems that as of today, this is not the case, as Gavin Newsom's lawsuit against Trump has failed dramatically.
That is, the judge was kind of unusual. The judge believed his own eyes, not Newsom's assurances, not the Democrats' assurances. What a son of a bitch. I suspect he's not the right kind of judge. The right kind of judges did everything the Democrats asked them to do. Well, politely asked. Even illegal acts, the Democrats called them wise judges.
It was a combination of the Geneva EE consensus and a phone call from the president that gave us confidence that we could really resolve this issue. Now, President Trump has to approve it, and the Chinese side has to convey this to their president. And as soon as that's done, we'll have another call and start implementing this agreement.
But do we have any breakthroughs?
Well, I think the two largest economies in the world have reached an agreement, right, regarding the framework agreement. We will start implementing this plan after President Trump approves it.
China and the United States reached an agreement to make a deal this morning after marathon negotiations this week. The deal stipulates that the export of rare earth metals from China to the United States will continue without obstacles in exchange for Chinese students being allowed to study at American universities. Under this deal, the United States will receive 55% of the tariff on all Chinese goods, while China will receive 10%.
Let's recap the main points. China supplies us with everything the United States needs, and even makes deliveries in advance, so that we have a reserve, so that we don't run out of the goods or components we need. We, the United States, take 55% from the Chinese, mostly in tariffs. That includes all sorts of penalties for fentanyl, for this and that, until they stop it, and then if they stop everything, we'll say, okay, then we'll lift a little. Well, we take 55%. That's on imported goods, on almost all of them, as I understand. In turn, the United States doesn't kick out 300,000 Chinese students from the country. What a wise move Trump made. God, what a smart son of a bitch he is. Some of them are children of high-ranking officials in China or wealthy people. And the United States supplies China with what it used to supply, China charges us a 10% tariff, that's 55. We charge a 10% tariff because there's nothing to punish us for. Here is Trump's message on
a huge victory for America. President Trump announced the details this morning, writing, "Our deal with China is done. Subject to final approval by Chairman Xi and myself, China will deliver all magnets and any necessary rare earth elements in advance. In the same way, we will provide China with what was agreed upon, including the opportunity for Chinese students to study at our colleges and universities, which has always suited me. We get 55% of the tariffs, while China gets 10%. The relationship is great. Thank you for your attention to this matter." Trump then added to the statement on China a few minutes later, "Chairman Xi and I will work closely together to open China to American trade. This will be a great victory for both countries."
In addition, as a continuation of the dialogue, the United States and China will discuss what other goods the United States will be able to export to China. For their 1.5 billion population, that is, it's a huge market. It's poor today, but it's huge. What does it really mean that China is starting to focus on its domestic market? So we actually broke it after all. In China, it was a huge concentration camp with overseers, of course, some privileged people, but mostly it was a massive concentration camp that was used as a factory of incredible size. And this factory, using slave labor, produced and exported everything possible around the world, earning a huge amount of money, keeping some to divide among themselves, and spending some on armaments and so on. Regarding bribery, I suggest bribing only the leaders of various countries rather than everyone. That's the approach. So, once again, that's all. This means that China is starting to focus on its domestic market. So, from being a labor camp with production that used Arab labor, China is starting to turn into a country with a middle class, which actually forms the market itself. In other words, the Chinese. The Chinese got lucky with a tram ticket because Trump's policy of America First will allow them to transform their country from a slave-owning one into, well, I hope into, so to speak, functioning capitalism. All this also means the slow decline of the Communist Party, but it gives the party bosses time to grab as much national wealth as possible and will allow the country to become something like a democratic republic.
The aforementioned. The 55% tariff imposed by Trump includes a basic duty of 10%, which is currently paid by any country in the world, plus 25% to balance out the unfair status of nations enjoying the favorable regime that China has, and an additional 20% surcharge for fentanyl trade, which admittedly is quite absurd, but China agrees. Yes, add another 20% so we can keep trading fentanyl and flooding your country with it. How about just stopping the fentanyl trade altogether? Beijing confirmed these details in its own statement this morning. Now the question is this deal good for the United States? However, this is certainly not what Wall Street anticipated. They wanted a return to the old status quo, where Trump cancels all tariffs and the dumping of cheap goods from China continues. This deal, a deal where 55% tariffs remain on all imports, is a good deal for the American working class. The tariffs are high enough to convince businesses to move production to the United States, acting as a forcing factor in the market, and making companies from all over the world build products here. If you manufacture products in the United States, there are no tariffs. It's completely exempt from them.
What this measure does is it shows manufacturers that it's more profitable for them to set up production in the United States and hire American workers and suppliers. And instead of importing goods made there, in China or in some other countries, cheaper goods and so on. But then you have to ship it by sea and then go through our customs and pay 55% in duties. So if you're making something for the American market, it will be much more profitable, cheaper, better, more convenient, and more pleasant to produce it in the United States of America. Since the day independence from foreign manufacturers was declared, American economists have been freaking out. I don't have another word for it. They claim that our country will inevitably slide into hyperinflation and depression. Worse than last century's Great Depression. On Wednesday morning, the long-awaited report on prices arrived. And prices keep going down and down.
It's impossible to look at the numbers and say this is bad news. The unexpected drop in core indicators, particularly in core goods, was expected due to the impact of tariffs. Except for certain areas that Steve mentioned, this hasn't been observed yet, so I think overall it's positive.
It's been almost 5 months since Trump's tariffs were introduced. Some were introduced later, while others were introduced a few months ago. The media warns of rising prices every month, yet it hasn't occurred. Why is that? Tariffs are inherently deflationary. We were lied to. This morning, Trump's finance minister was testifying about the bill. Look at what happens when Democrat Linda Vance tries to manipulate the situation regarding Trump's tariffs, claiming that they are causing prices to rise. Bezant says, "Sorry, Congresswoman, but the inflation report came out this morning. There is no inflation." Her response, "You're a sexist. You hate women. Look, Secretary Bezant."
We can already see prices for many everyday goods rising. No, Congresswoman, today we had "the time belongs to me, the time belongs to me." Please don't interrupt me. I will ask you questions and give you a chance to answer them, but please don't interrupt me during my time.
With pleasure.
All right, I know I'm a woman, but please try to stick to answering my questions.
When they have nothing to say, they accuse you of either racism or sexism. And if she were also a black lesbian missing a leg who had been in prison for drug dealing, then she would be completely untouchable. That's how it is. Why is inflation decreasing in the United States? Importers don't want to lose the market, and despite the tariffs, they haven't raised prices. Energy has become cheaper, reducing transportation and production costs, affecting many sectors. Supplies have stabilized, and the number of working and earning Americans is increasing. So having more buyers allows prices to stay the same or even go down. So that's how the video starts today.
Apologies. I regret some of the posts I made about President Trump, says Elon Musk last week. They went too far. Elon publicly apologized. It got 60 million views, almost 100,000 reposts, 600,000 likes, me included, and a lot of support. Elon's public apology for disrespecting President Trump is meaningful, as few people do so. Thank you, Elon. At least he didn't mention his golf game? Good job. We all have moments of mental blackout, says Retard Feinder. Good job.
All right.
Unfortunately, I kept all the evidence. Whatever political differences they may have, Donald Trump and Elon Musk surely understand and agree that the left will imprison and kill them both. Fair enough. It's nice to see. A true man knows how to apologize. Come back, Elon.
Recently, Elon Musk met with Melania. I think it was a softer conversation. Yes, and they also told him, I suspect, something like, "Dad, Trump loves you. He is very grateful to you. You are a big help. You're really doing great. You are a big help and support." And most importantly, he couldn't have become who he is if it weren't for you. Let's not talk about this, but I just want to explain something to you. Even Trump can't get bills through Congress in the form that you or he would like. You both want the same thing. Here is the restoration of prosperity, health, meaning, and security for the citizens of this great country. But Donnie knows the political side of life, and you don't even need to get involved in that. You're in the heavens, you soar, and let him handle all the earthly matters. Unfortunately, what you're saying is a bit naive, because those bastards sitting in Congress, they're all bastards. They always have to grab something for themselves, and besides that, they're always afraid of something. So, let's better take small steps toward what you both are striving for, rather than aiming for a big leap and getting nowhere, okay? And maybe even end up back at the point of almost no return. And maybe the big scared child hiding inside Elon Musk calmed down and, realizing what he had done, wrote what he wrote, and then went to Trump and shook his hand. I don't know if he cried or hugged him or not, but he said, "I went too far. I'm very, very sorry."
Donald Trump spoke today with a new perspective on Elon Musk, saying, I have no hard feelings. I would like to talk to him. It seems like they're already talking anyway. It is reported that Musk and Trump spoke privately before the post expressing regret was published. We await Trump's next move. Can they mend their relationship? Only time will tell. But President Trump received a phone call from Elon Musk late Monday night. This led to a public expression of regret from the billionaire on Wednesday morning for the attacks he launched against the president during their unusually public confrontation last week. This was reported by people familiar with the content of the conversation. Mr. Musk's appeal to Trump came after the tech entrepreneur personally spoke with James David Vance and White House Chief of Staff Susie Wiles on Friday. According to two people, this paved the way for a truce between the two men. These people spoke on condition of anonymity because the discussions were private. The conversation set the stage for a more restrained tone. Mr. Musk apologized. Trump and Musk's representatives didn't respond to comment requests. All right. Musk spent several days making it clear that he wanted to reconcile with President Trump to smooth things over after a series of sharp personal attacks. Actually, to be honest, that was surprisingly mild for Donald Trump.
I agree. Trump was very, very mild in responding to Musk. I think Trump knows that Musk is a big, overgrown, brilliant kid, and you have to deal with him very differently than with the rest of the world. Someone said that people who suffer from the same form of autism that Musk has, Asperger's, perceive the world around them, which is normal for us, as noisy, irritating, crazy, and frightening, like a marketplace. With Musk, you always have to remember that he is a combination of a genius and a frightened child. And Trump, well, he doesn't have time for psychotherapy or long conversations to calm down a genius. The president must lead the country.
You were with Elon M. Is there anything you could do to forgive him? Could you imagine that it's possible?
Well, I don't hold any grudges. I was really surprised that it happened. He attacked Bill. It's amazing that this is the best thing we've ever signed in this country. This is phase 1, 2, and 3. Suddenly, everything falls into place perfectly. And when he did that, I wasn't happy at all. So that's really a shame. You said he has problems. What kind of problems exactly? I mean, is it because of drugs? I don't know what his problem is, honestly. I don't know. Lately, I haven't really thought about it much, and he just didn't get it. I think he's actually really sorry that he said that. Or maybe it was about something else.
I mean, didn't he have an argument with Scott Bessent near your office?
Yes, but it wasn't a fight, people. But it seems they had a little argument, but you heard it, that's typical. Yes, I heard. It's pretty typical for, that happens.
And now, as we approach the beginning of the end of the riots in Los Angeles, we're still waiting for the June 14th riot in other cities, as promised by the Democrats, with surprises. They're looking for someone, Elpidio Reyna. Who is Reyna? Why is the United States government offering a $50,000 reward for locating him? Elpidio took bricks that someone had brought to spots convenient for the protesters and threw them at passing police cars. Just civilians. It's amazing he didn't kill anyone.
The one who was throwing the brick was... Our lawyer, Bill S., was identified. Or now he has renounced his name, and we are told that he is wanted. He may run, but he won't be able to hide. His name is Elpidio Reina, and this is who he is. Remember, this is the same man who was throwing bricks at a car at the exhaust windows, which many would call attempted murder.
Let me explain. Elpidio was throwing pre-prepared bricks at passing cars, including a police car. A brick hitting the windshield can cause an accident, which, as we know, can be fatal. He wasn't throwing tomatoes, not little stones, but bricks.
That's right.
So,
the person's identity has been confirmed. He is currently in hiding, claiming he threw stones at federal officers leaving the Paramount command post on Saturday. A brazen assault captured on camera, which nearly turned deadly. Reina, 40, is accused of assaulting a federal officer. If found guilty, he faces up to 8 years in prison. The FBI is offering a reward of $50,000 for any information leading to his capture. And we have something else. Here's what the FBI originally released. At that time, they didn't know his name. Back then, he was unidentified, but now he's been recognized and they're looking for additional information. That was the original post. Then we saw that Dan Bongino shared this post saying, "All right, give it up, Elpidio, you're from Compton." The FBI in Los Angeles says, "We have identified the man wanted for assaulting a federal officer this weekend." Elpidio Reina, 40, from Compton, is a fugitive. The Department of Homeland Security is searching for his whereabouts. Please contact them if you have information on his location. No, a reward of up to $50,000 is being offered for information leading to his arrest and conviction, and he should be considered armed and dangerous. And he is on the run.
What does armed and dangerous mean? Translating from police language to plain human language, it means you can shoot him. And knowing that Elpidio will get a maximum, 8 years, that's just the maximum sentence. Most likely he won't even get that. That's what it comes down to. What he did, and in court, so to speak. I bet they'll make a deal, and the attempted murder of a police officer will be reduced to creating a dangerous situation. And this very Elpidio will be out in 3 or 4 years. So, citizens, police officers, if Elpidio resists in any way or shows that he's dangerous, they'll definitely shoot him on the spot. And the reason is that he's armed and dangerous. Well, and now this is Mashenka. But before her, gentlemen, for the channel's sponsors, we make special videos and will hold special meetings as soon as we get a few more sponsors. You can become a sponsor for as little as $4 a month with the option to pay more if you wish. Oh, and if you subscribe for a year in advance, it's $3 a month. Also on Camerton Global, that's spelled with a K, Camerton Global in English letters, there are video series about Putin, about his childhood, his youth, his achievements, about the Clintons, and about the 80 bodies that surrounded them. Also, there are completely precise predictions for the next 17 years. Well, and now Gavin Newsom, the governor of California, has announced that he will deliver the most important speech of his life. Here's what it looked like.
All right, we're working on the audio. EMM. We're not quite sure if it's related to the governor's equipment.
Let me clarify. They didn't turn on the microphones in the studio. Maybe they went to check out the riots or see what's happening. Or maybe they went to watch television. Maybe they smoked some weed. Or maybe they just didn't care about their job responsibilities at all. In California, black people cannot have job advantages due to their race.
Or maybe it's due to some other technical reasons, but we're really trying to fix the broadcast right now.
So you can listen to us without
interruptions. Of course, we will have excerpts from what the governor said, but...
And so the governor, whose main idea is to run as a representative of the Democratic Party in the presidential election in 2028, said the most important words of his life. But when he was finally heard, when his microphone was turned on, he was finally heard. It got even worse.
Governor Newsom's speech, we know that he did indeed file a lawsuit.
And then everything went sideways. The technical difficulties were probably the most interesting part of the speech. It's absolutely symbolic, considering that Newsom literally says nothing even when you can hear him. This speech, or rather the attempt at a speech to the nation last night, was exactly how the dying old media presented it. That speech was a terrible disaster by any objective measure. Honestly, I don't know what Newsom, or as Trump calls him, was trying to do, except obviously trying to present himself as the frontrunner for the Democratic nomination. In 2028, he doesn't care about Los Angeles.
This is Dr. Stephen Tarley with 1 million subscribers. So what was Gavin Newsom talking about? Probably about how to stop riots and arson, right? Or maybe about how to prevent them in the future. The City of Angels in his state is burning. After all, he
doesn't care about the citizens of California. He doesn't care about the residents of California. There was nothing there. There was absolutely no substance or policy that could in any way be considered a direct response to these riots. We have no idea how we're going to deal with these riots. In fact, it was a disastrous speech that not only started with technical failures, but was also preceded by its own mistake. Newsom, and when he was caught lying earlier that same day...
Let me explain what he did out of sheer stupidity. Trump told reporters that he spoke with Newsom for more than 15 minutes about stopping the riots and about sending the National Guard to the city. And when Newsom was asked about it, like, did you know, he said, actually, I haven't spoken with the president even once in the last 2 days.
A blatant lie. Maybe you saw this. Earlier that same day, Newsom actually tried to accuse President Trump of lying. Trump claimed that he contacted Newsom before sending in the National Guard troops over the weekend, and Newsom responded by saying, no, he didn't do that. That's not true. No, President Trump did not call me. I have never spoken with President Trump about this. And what did Trump do? He went ahead and published his call log with the exact time when he called Newsom. The first time he called him was at 1:22 anti-meridium on June 7th. At that time, Newsom didn't answer. Trump, showing persistence, called him back a minute later, and the call log clearly shows that they talked for 16 minutes.
Why do I say that Newsom is a fool? Well, I said jerk, sorry, yes. Doesn't he know that? On all phones, from smartphones to regular landlines, it is recorded where you called, how long you talked, and the time of the call. And this jerk wants to be the President of the United States of America. He can't even lie properly. He's a fool, but a good-looking one. Well, I mean a good-looking fool. But Newsom's foolishness didn't end there that day. It kept going. It happened before. It continued after. But that day, it didn't end either. He also filed a lawsuit against Trump for sending the National Guard to Los Angeles, which he supposedly knew nothing about. But in reality, he discussed it with Trump for 16 minutes.
He denied California's request to prohibit Trump from using the California National Guard to maintain peace and order during these protests.
God loves the Trinity. The Trinity is loved by God. That's how it always was in Belarus. First they catch someone lying, then their own judge throws the case out. And then, as the finale, like the cherry on top, comes the most important speech in the life of Nancy Pelosi's nephew.
So obviously the day was going badly for Newsom from the very start. And then we got to his speech. And it was literally nothing more than yet another attempt by the failed governor of California to do what he does best. He's best at shifting the responsibility for his own disaster, which he created himself. It's not about the social conditions that caused millions and millions of people to leave our state and move elsewhere during my 2 terms. It's not about my sanctuary city policies. No, it's all Trump's fault. It's Trump, Hitler, dictator. That's the problem. There's nothing else to see here. Actually, everything is great in California. Peaceful, mostly peaceful, fiery, but mostly peaceful. Peaceful. I mean, under my leadership, California now ranks first in all sorts of categories. California ranks first in poverty in the country. No exceptions. We have the biggest income gap between the middle and upper middle class, and also the biggest difference
between the rich
and the poor in the whole country. In fact, maybe the protesters have a reason to wave Mexican flags, because the wealth gap in California is even worse than in Mexico. It's actually worse than in third world countries. 80% of the jobs in California, did you hear that right? 88% are below the median wage. And half of them pay less than $40,000 a year. California has the highest unemployment rate in the entire country, as well as the highest illiteracy rate. According to United States Census data, over the past 15 years, an average of 100,000 California residents leave the state each year, which exceeds the number of people moving in.
This is obvious to the naked eye. 650,000 people leave every year. And that's why, to fill the positions of manufacturers, scientists, engineers, teachers, welders, millions of illegal immigrants are brought into California. Otherwise, California would lose a lot of seats in Congress. I've already talked about this. We have such a stupid law written that when they're figuring out how many people to send to Congress, they count how many people live there. That's not how it's written, I think, in our Constitution or in the explanation. But they don't count citizens, they count residents. So the citizens left, but the number of residents didn't decrease. And in Congress, there are still the same 52 representatives from California, 52 out of 435. That's serious, a powerful force. Let's listen to Scott Jennings. He's always accurate, thorough, and objective.
That amazes me. First of all, this guy is the governor of the state. Riots are currently happening in a major city in the state, while he simultaneously launches a presidential campaign.
Any other way to interpret what happened? He's running a failed state. He's at the head of a failed
state. There's nothing particularly controversial about Donald Trump enforcing federal laws or immigration laws, but for the Democrats and for Gavin Newsom, it's seen as an insult. Right now in California,
the following: a lot of
foreign nationals have taken over large areas of the United States. One city is burning, and the president of the United States is trying to restore order. That's all that's happening. But we hear many complaints from Gavin Newsom.
The Democrats in California have failed immensely. I doubt this message will resonate with Americans. It seems to me this will look like an attempt to take advantage of the situation, and people will wonder why, in fact, the governor of California is complaining about Harvard when one of his cities is burning. It's not just Scott. Republican strategist Joe Borelli also shares this view.
Let's start with the most ridiculous part of this speech. This is already the fifth night. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 nights of riots, looting, and violence on his city's streets. And Gavin Newsom is using this opportunity to give a speech against Donald Trump, not against the rioters, not against the people committing crimes. And other television channels are saying that this is the first step toward his presidential ambitions. And basically, this is what will make Gavin Newsom president. But if that's the case, let me be the first to welcome President J.D. Vance in 2008, because that's exactly what's going to happen. Whether the Democrats like it or not, if that's their main candidate.
And what happened after Gavin delivered his epoch-making speech? What did the flash polls show?
The fundamental problem for Newsom is that Americans simply don't believe it. One of the best polling centers, they are among the most accurate pollsters in 2024. They knew that Trump would win, and win by a large margin. They just published this poll, and it's an absolute disaster for the Democrat domestic terrorists. 59% support President Trump's decision to deploy the National Guard, only 39% disapprove. That's a 20-point difference in Trump's favor by 20 points. And it's not just ready-made garments. Another one of the most accurate polling centers of 2024 found that 58%, almost as much as the 59%, 58% support the Trump administration's efforts to deport illegal migrants. Only 37% disapprove. Again, almost the same difference. This time, it's a 21-point advantage for Trump. Ready-Made Garments also asked, how do you evaluate the actions of the Trump administration regarding the deportation of illegal migrants? 55% responded that everything is fine or even not enough, while only 36% believe that Trump has gone too far. Again, there's a 19-point difference in favor of Trump. Even one of the most biased left-leaning polling agencies, even they are forced to admit that President Trump's approval rating is rising because of these
riots. And under
the curtain. No one supports these riots. No one supports these Democrat politicians who are trying to blame Trump for allegedly escalating the situation. For example, take a look at this. This is Manhattan last night. Here's the chaos that broke out near the Manhattan Federal Building. You'll notice that there were only protesters and the New York Police Department there, and that's it. There were no immigration and customs enforcement agents, no National Guard troops, only police officers and rioters. You see, that's the Achilles heel of the Democrats' claim that Trump is inciting these riots. The only thing inciting these riots is the madness of the left itself.
Side. With that, ladies and gentlemen, we'll wrap up. As I said in the previous episode, when God wants to punish, he takes away reason, and he is punishing our leftists. Oh, there's a reason for that.